Welcome back to AspireVue Hot Topics, where in 10 minutes or less, we unpack a leadership thought to equip and serve you on your leadership journey. I'm joined by Dr. Larry Kuhn, founder and creator of AspireVue, and this is part 2 of our session on learning through failure.
So now, Luke, I know you've had a chance here to kind of listen to my story about the farming challenge of getting stuck. What's been going through your mind as you have listened to the story of getting stuck and facing failure when we're trying to make an impact?
Yeah. Well, I can certainly relate to it. That's for sure. And as you were describing that, almost the walk of shame back into your dad's barn and having to, have that conversation. It's a little lighter maybe when we're talking farming, but maybe someone's talking about a business plan or a lifelong career trajectory or whatever it might be. I'd be curious to know, when being maybe kind of imprisoned to that fear or imprisoned by that fear of failure, what are some of the first steps to breaking those chains and finding that freedom?
I think number one is shifting to take a systemic approach. If it's only just a cause and effect, and I'm trying to affect an outcome, and there's not other factors at play, then I'm running the risk of some confounding issue happening that I never planned on. And I think, in my arrogance, that I know what the solution is. So taking a systemic approach can be useful, because when we're dealing with systems, I don't care what the issue is, there are many inputs. There is a natural ebb and flow to the process, and we have to dance with that a bit. Our most recent interaction with whatever it is doesn't necessarily have to characterize the entirety of the thing. Let's say that you and I get into a tiff or a disagreement. That doesn't necessarily mean that our relationship is characterized by this conflict.
Sure.
This is a temporary thing, but when you put it in the bigger picture, shifting to the system view can be useful. When you look at, let's say, the Grand Canyon did not happen overnight. It didn't happen as a result of some gully washer that came and made a huge change. Most of the time, change happens in a way that is gradual. It's the periodic rainfall that is steady, incremental, and multifaceted with intermittent interactions. We just planted some grass out in front of our house this summer, and there was no evidence that there was any grass coming up for quite a while, but we kept watering it. We made sure that it remained wet. We made sure that there was plenty of sun, the things that you need to have, put some fertilizer on. Lo and behold, after about 2 months, it's thick and it's green. And it's kind of like that. Change is like that. It's, and when we're so eager to make a difference, when setbacks happen, there are several steps that I think are useful for us to consider in addition to taking a systems approach. Number one, I have to manage my internal dialogue. What am I telling myself? If I'm telling myself, oh my goodness, this isn't working, I must be ineffective, how different that is from an inner dialogue that is like, okay, I've just found yet another way that isn't working well. What do I need to do differently? So that's one thing. I need to back away from that simplistic all or nothing thinking that it's either good or bad or right or wrong. I like thinking at most good, better, best. And how good is that working? How well is it working? And that which is good is that which works well. And I want to create some small wins rather than it's all based on one thing and is it going to work or not? And if it doesn't, it's on me. One of my favorite quotes is by H.L. Mencken. And he said, for every complex problem, there's a simple solution and it's wrong. And when we look at some of the assumptions that we're working under when we're going into facilitating change and impact, I think we need to adjust those to allow for temporary setbacks to occur. Notice that sometimes the problem is not the problem. So here again, next step, let's look for the pattern. Let's say it's not a problem, but it's a pattern. When I start to encounter resistance, that's the time that I need to become curious. Previously, we mentioned the strategy of shift, focus, and release. Well, the same thing happens as I'm sitting there on the tractor. If I can notice right away when resistance is coming, or in this case, when my wheels start spinning, that's the time to push in on the clutch and make some adjustments. Don't just keep going, being oblivious. So we have to really pay attention to the system. What's really happening and what's the pattern that is going on? Sometimes I do need to connect to something outside of my situation. It's those things that can pull us, not drive us. So be willing to open yourself up to coaching, other resources, different perspectives. perhaps there's something that I need to learn here beyond just attributing blame, beating myself up, or shaming others. I'll share one last story, and then we'll move on to another aspect of overcoming failure and facing failure. When I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity at the end of graduate school to go on internship, and it was a very competitive process. During that time, I flew all over the United States and made applications all over the place for internship. And you want to be successful. And so did others in my cohort. I happened to be a fairly high scoring guy in the cohort, did well. I was the oldest student there probably. So I thought, I've got this in the bag. Well, lo and behold, you get matched by a computer system, and you wake up at 5 a.m, and I woke up and found out I didn't match, even though I was well prepared. There were like 3,000 people who were trying to get 1,500 internship sites. So there's a lot of us that just didn't match, which meant I need to wait another year. And I remember going back to bed and laying down and telling my wife, well, I didn't match. And she was like, oh my gosh, now we have to wait another year. And I'm like, yes. I mean, it was a huge setback. But I chose at that time to do something different rather than just saying, why me, poor me, feeling sorry for myself, blaming. That wasn't going to be helpful. So I asked a friend of mine, a colleague, Marv Erzman, if he would be open to having me teach in his class. And he said he'd let me teach a class or two. And so I got an opportunity to do that. And then he had a physical problem that happened, and I ended up being asked to teach all 6 of his courses that he was teaching at the time.
Wow.
So for that year, I got an opportunity to do something completely different. And I never would have had that opportunity. And it's kind of interesting because out of that experience, he and I developed a mutual trust of one another. And still to this day, that happened in 2007. And here we are, 2023, still to this day. He and I work very closely together as colleagues. And he eventually asked me to come and work with him and do his assessments for him. And basically my whole career really opened up as a result of not getting the internship assignment that I was hoping for. So I learned something out of that I'd like to pass along as we close here on this particular topic. When things start to get a little bit squirrely and it looks like it's just not making sense, it's at that moment that those are one of the things. Resistance comes in many forms. And if we can take a look at that and go, I wonder what else is going on here. So we step back, we decathect from it, let go of it, and look at it from a bigger system, there might be something else that's going on and our vision is too narrow. So being able to shift and refocus often opens us up our vision to see an alternative that is not just a failure. It's actually an opportunity. That's the big takeaway, I think, how is it that when we're trying to make an impact, I think we can often expect that there will be natural resistance that will happen. But if we can hold loosely and not so tight, not let it be defining of our worth and value, we can find a different ending to the story than just spinning our wheels and acting like we're not stuck.
Sure.
That's pretty crazy.
Wow. So when you talk about learning through failure, you've got some credentials to back up the topic. That's for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And you love the stories about the inventors who used, 1,000 different things that didn't work for the filament in the light bulb, but they found the one that did. Yeah. And it made all the difference. So, so there's kind of reflecting. We'll take another stab at it, looking at specifically the aspect of criticism in just a moment.
Sounds great. Dr. Larry, thank you for sharing today. To hear part 3 of this conversation or other conversations in the Psychology of Impact series, be sure to subscribe to this channel.